what the whole thing we're doing at the moment is we're looking at movement. And we're particularly looking at movement in terms of that basketball shot. And you've got film doing that, and we're analysing that movement. Now, movement doesn't occur, no movement will ever occur unless force is applied. And this whole idea about force is a force is a push or a pull. Nothing ever happens and nothing ever moves in this world, including yourselves, unless a force is applied. And there are three laws that govern force. Three things explain how force works. And if you can understand those three laws of force, you understand everything that's happening around you and everything that's moving around you. And you can apply it to anything, whether it be a basketball shot, whether it be driving a car, whatever sort of movement. Wherever there's movement, the laws of force are governed by three laws there. And they're called Newton's laws. And the reason they're called Newton's laws is because 500 years ago, a man called Isaac Newton was sitting under a tree, and he was sitting under a tree reading a book, and an apple fell on his head, and the apple left a bruise on his head. It actually hurt him. And he wondered, how did that apple get from there, and how did it land on my head, and how did it hurt me? And he came up with three laws that explain everything in terms of movement and in terms of force. And they're called Newton's laws. And I'm going to explain them to you very, very simply, although they're a little bit more complicated than what I make out, but I'm going to try and explain them as simply as I possibly can. Newton's law 1. It's called inertia. Newton says that every single object anywhere has inertia. What inertia is resistance to movement. Everything around us will not move. It doesn't like to move. It likes to stay stationary. We don't move. Everything around us has inertia. And inertia, the more mass an object has, the more inertia it has. Essentially, the heavier an object is, the more inertia it has. Now, how is that related? How does that work in real life? This thing here, that has inertia. However, it has very small mass. For me to move that object, I only have to apply a small amount of force to enable that object to move. It has very little inertia because it has very little mass. I take this table, for example, and if I apply the same amount of force to that table, it's not going to move because it has more inertia than what this has. Drakel, if you can just stop making your little noises, that would be really good. It's all been captured on video, and all it does is disrupt me who's trying to teach the class. Shh. Now, I can move this table, but I'd have to apply enormous amounts of force, or much more force to it, to actually move that because it has more inertia, resistance to movement. Now I could take a massive object such as this building, and I can't apply enough force to make this building move because it has so much inertia. So that's Newton's law 1, inertia. Now in terms of us, our body has inertia. Our body has mass, our bones have mass. They're not going to move, our body is not going to move unless we apply force. And we have to apply enough force to overcome our body's natural inertia. When we're shooting the basketball, we have to move our joints, and we move our bones to enable that move, to enable us to apply force to the ball. And we have to apply enough force to actually make that happen. The ball itself has inertia. The ball won't move unless we apply enough force to overcome the ball's inertia. Is there any questions about inertia? That's law 1. Law 2. Force equals the mass times the acceleration. Now think of acceleration in terms of speed. The more force we apply to an object, the more acceleration will happen, the more speed will happen. When we shoot the basketball, the more force we apply to the basketball, the more speed the basketball will have, the more acceleration it has. The less force, the less speed. Now this can work in so many different ways. And we'll go through that at a later date, but that can work in a lot of different ways. This whole idea of force equals mass times acceleration. In terms of our body, if we want to produce lots of force using our body, and we want to, because in basketball we want to shoot a big 3-point shot, we have to apply a lot of force to that ball to ensure it gets to the hoop. If we want to do that, we can do one of two things. We can increase the mass, use more muscles. We can increase the speed in which we contract those muscles. If we do those two things, we produce more force. Force equals mass times acceleration. I think the main one with this is that if we want to increase the speed of something, of an object, we have to apply more force to it. Alright, and that's very relevant to everything. Newton's law 3. Action, reaction. Every time you apply a force in one direction, an equal and opposite force is applied in the other direction. If I want to jump up in the air, I apply a force to the ground, and the ground applies a force to me. When I want to jump, I go down. I apply a force down to the ground, and the ground applies an equal and opposite force and makes me jump up. The basketball hoop. I try and do a layup. I put the ball against the backboard. The ball applies the force to the back of the hoop, the backboard, and the backboard applies a force to the ball, and the ball rebounds back in. When I'm bouncing the ball, the basketball's a force applied to the ground of the ball, and the ground applies a force back, and it's equal and opposite. And the more force I put on the ball towards the ground, the more force is applied up to make the basketball jump back up at me. Alright, that's action-reaction. If I want to get really angry and I want to punch the wall because I'm angry, I applied a force to the wall and the wall applied a force to my hand. Equal and opposite. Now, I only applied a small amount of force there, so no harm really done. However, if I was to apply a much greater force and I was to smack the wall as hard as I could, I might put a hole in the wall, but that wall's going to apply a force equal and opposite back to me. And it may end up that it actually breaks one of my bones in my hand. That could be a very important possibility. Just stop recording there, Kalani.